Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Thursday edition of the American Scouser podcast. I am Gally, sitting in for Maka this week. He is probably filming some church service program or something I wouldn't be allowed in or kicked out of, or, well, the place would probably light on fire if I walked in. But he is stuck doing that this evening, so he cannot be with us to host these fine, merry men. So we'll start with Trevor out in Rhode Island. Trevor, how are you doing?
It's been a long day, but I'm ready to go this evening. Ready to go.
Long days, as always. Alan joins us from Houston, giving his greetings. No weather update from Houston, but I'll say this: it was a balmy and warm day up here in New England, so there's no complaining about the weather for the first time in a long time on the American Scouser podcast in the first 5 minutes. Brian, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Same thing as Trevor. Long day. It's sitting in the middle of nowhere, deal with Navy people. Fun stuff.
Can't imagine sitting in the middle of nowhere. Can imagine even less dealing with Navy people. Alan says it's raining since Tuesday, thankfully, and honestly, no one cares, Alan, because you spent the whole entire last 12 months telling us how wonderful the weather was in Houston. Every time we started this podcast telling you that the weather was terrible somewhere else, so you can keep that rain in Houston, hold it dear to you. We're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about the matches this week, but first, I want to always remind everyone that you can get involved with us and the whole crew at American Scouser through our Discord channel. We can drop a link later in the comment section here. It's a great area. It's a great community. It's basically a place to have banter all afternoon. We spent the afternoon arguing whether or not Darwin was good, whether he was shite, whether or not we knew how to pronounce the club's name that we were playing today. It was a good old afternoon. Some would call it not working. Others would just call it good old fun on a Thursday. But we're going to get to today's match, and it's going to be what we spend the majority of our time on. But I didn't think it was fair to have a Liverpool podcast and not at least get your guys' opinions and or thoughts on last weekend's events. So we're not going to harp on this long, guys, because I have to be honest. I think my opinions on this will actually be in the negative to the opposite of what the masses want to hear. Because I'm going to raise my hand and say I am one who thinks we are making too much of this, and I think it has gone too far. I'm going to say this. I want to hear your guys' opinions, and on Monday night, I shared how frustrated I was, and maybe that's why I feel it's gone too far 3 days later, because I got my rant off my chest. But I feel like every day it goes by, we go from the wrong and the injustice to like actually being a martyr, and it's starting to like do the opposite of what I thought, where it could galvanize the side, that it could eventually become like a hindrance and an excuse if things eventually don't work out our way. But it's not as much the offside goal. We've now heard the tapes. We've now had the conversation. So I'm going to start with you, Trevor. Take apart and aside your personal opinion and feeling Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon. Sorry. I want you to give me what you actually believe can come out of this from a standpoint of positive change, improvement.
More than anything, I think this can lead us to more transparency. And I think in just general sports, I think that's a lot of what we as fans ask for, is if there's transparency and accountability. Those are the two things that I'll those will be the tenets of whatever small little rant I'm going to give here, because human error happens, mistakes happen. We can all sit here and we've heard it from every other fan base. Oh, remember this one time that we got screwed? Oh, you guys can just shove it. Who fucking cares? No one cares about your one time that you got screwed in a regular season game, blah, blah, blah. Look at the Champions League, the times that we got screwed. And I think that's just a very narrow-minded way to look at it. Whereas if sometimes you can just make sure that something like this, when these things happen, you get that audio, or you get people being kind of not necessarily put in their place, but dealt with accordingly. Because that audio was guys that like came up to a scene and didn't realize that their body cams were still on, type of thing. They were just scrambling. They were in full panic, and rightfully so, given the situation. So I think that it's something where I don't, with, and in Brian's little blurb down there, I don't think Howard Webb's ever going to do anything, because I think the Premier League was bringing him in to try to be kind of like internal affairs, but instead he's just that teacher that finds kids smoking in the bathroom and asks for a light with them. He doesn't really care about holding people's feet to the fire. I don't think that's ever going to change. So at least if we can kind of like shed the light on these things and make sure that it doesn't happen to us again, but it doesn't happen to other people. So when these egregious situations happen, there's accountability and transparency. That's all we can ask for generally.
As a kid who used to fire down cigarettes in the bathroom, I probably would have appreciated one of those principals and or teachers that wanted the light. Brian, I'm going to go to you next here, and a little different spin on it. Take aside the offside goal, which we all know at this point has been proven to be a mistake by the officials. They've admitted it was a mistake. It was a mistake in adjudication of the process. It was a mistake in application of VAR. It was just a mistake on every level, including the idiot on the sideline who raised the flag. Jota's red card is now coming into question, as the PGMOL somehow released today that they feel that Jota's second yellow wasn't warranted. They don't review the first yellow, which should have been a yellow on a Doge. But nonetheless, I have a real problem with it, because I think there was enough contact, and I think if you're that much of a moron to just get a yellow and then make a foul like that, you can get sent off. Do you honestly believe the refs want to admit a mistake, or do you think the refs are trying to save some face and just literally throw Liverpool a bone over the fence any chance they can, for the pure hope and fact that Jurgen will stop going on this crusade to bury them for their actions on Saturday?
I kind of agree with what you said, Gally. I think that second yellow with it was very much warranted. I mean, yeah, they say right there that it wasn't. But like you said, if he came there, went into that challenge right there, knowing he was on a yellow card, it was just overreactive for Jota. He shouldn't even go there and go anywhere near him. He knew that was what the case was going to happen for him. I don't think the officials are trying to go out there and throw us a bone. I think they're trying to save face for themselves personally. I still question Jones's red card. I mean, with the still that we came across there right off the bat. I mean, even though it was already been upheld right there, because you can't really not uphold it, because his foot went over top the ball. But I still question whether that was actually a straight red. I mean, I'd give it's a hard yellow. But a red, nah. But to go with what Trevor was saying, just to to kind of wrap that up, this whole thing up. I'm tired of hearing about replays. It's not going to be a replay, of this match right there. It is. We need to move on from it. But I just hope that going forward that we get some accountability and also some transparency. And I really want what has happened in the last World Cup with the semi-automatic offsides to go out there and actually be thought about. Which will eliminate some of this human error that we have in there, because I thought that the World Cup actually was smooth as far as the offside calls. But even if throwing, like we've talked about in this Thursdays right there, let's go there and be able to hear the audio live right there, like you do in rugby. Let's go there and actually have everybody be able to go there and know what these calls are, what the VAR officials are talking about, to the official, so that we don't go there and have this whole blind and wait till Monday to have the audio released and then finally say, okay, well, your time is this is our mistake. We're so sorry. Again, Howard Webb stuff. I'm not a fan, but we just gotta live and let live and move on to the next.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm gonna sit here and blame how it went. I think the Jones thing is this. They called it a yellow card. It was probably the right call. I understand why they sent him to the monitor based on what the guy sees, and it's up to the ref at that point. He sees the still photo first, which obviously is going to poison the chalice. It just makes for, it honestly set up the argument that then becomes even more transparent that just the VAR was out to lunch for the afternoon. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not someone who thinks Darren England is out to get us. I'm really not. I'm not someone that thinks the Premier League puts Paul Tierney on our matches because they want us to drop points. I do think we as a supporters group sometimes grab onto that narrative because it's an easy way to rally around each other, and we've always been. I don't want to say the victim because we're not victims, but we've always been good at grabbing a story and holding on to it. And you can think of like 20, 30 of them over the last 10 years, let alone the last, 125 of the club's been in existence. So I think in this one I agree with you. I don't think a replay is ever going to happen. I don't think a replay should happen. And I know I'm in the minority there. Klopp wants to tell you why a replay is necessary. I think Klopp's biggest comment today that made the most sense was if the refs really knew there was a problem, they should have just called us two managers together with the referees. We should have stopped the game. And then Tottenham would have had the choice to decide to go Arsene Wenger like he did in the cup match and just allow the other team to dribble down the pitch and score a goal to tie up the match and then play it from the center circle at 1-1. And that would have been the right decision to do, right? Like just give Liverpool their goal, the goal they deserved, the goal they were up. And I actually believe Ange would have done that because I think he is a stand-up guy and a good manager. And if they had said, we know unequivocally we were wrong, they are up 1-0. I think he sends his troops out to allow a goal in. And, we've seen it before. It wouldn't have been the first time in European football a team let the other one take a goal straight in based on an egregious error by the officials. Jose Mourinho did it once as manager. Arsene Wenger did it once as manager. It's usually guys who have big respect for the game, and I think Klopp and Ange have that respect for each other and the game. That's where I once again put it on the FA. I put it on the match officials because I actually think the officials knew they made a huge mistake and didn't have the gumption to just stand up and raise their hand. And they're going to hide behind the fact that the rule says once the game starts again, you don't stop. But this is where, and I'm probably in the minority here, this is where I think like a Mark Clattenburg or like an Anthony Taylor, like a referee who almost has too big of an ego, would have broke the rules and been like, no, I'm stopping this. I'm going to have these guys talk. They're not going to fire Anthony Taylor. The guy refereed the the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Like, they're not going to fire their best referee, Europeanly rated. So to me, this was about, once again, having weak-minded officials hiding behind 18 pages of rules instead of applying common sense, which is, I think, what I've always wanted any referee, umpire, official, field judge, like just use common sense applied to the rules. So, Trevor, why in 2023 do we blame computers and process and not the human being who can't think like a human?
As you said earlier, it's an easy story to latch onto. I think it's something where if you don't look in the entire picture, you can focus on that one part of it that really just makes you upset and ignore potential fixes that are just outside the frame of that thing that makes you upset. And there's a lot of, and I've always said it, the fact that we know the names and backgrounds of all these referees in this league pisses me off. I hate that I know what teams David Cootie roots for. I hate that I know where Simon Hooper's from. That's not information I want to retain. That's not information that I needed to know. the fact that I knew his name to begin with is upsetting. But it's something in this day and age, you kind of need to know what you're dealing with going into a game. Like, oh, this guy gives a lot of cards. This guy, last time, the Paul Tierney example. Every time you get him, you know there's going to be some shenanigans. There's going to be some grandstanding moment where he needs to sit there and take his bow. It's just a fact of the state of the game it is in England. But I think that goes back to what I'm saying about accountability, where they just kind of fall back on, well, the law says this, and, oh, God forbid I kind of shape it a little bit to fix a very rare situation in terms of that the miscommunication and just how much of a gigantic clusterfuck it was. That is something that, as you said, a more strong-willed official would sit there and just go, hey, no, you kick the ball out of play. We're going to have a conversation real quick. I'm going to explain to both parties what has gone down because they can't hear it. Everybody that's in the officials section knows what's happening. The two managers are sitting there scratching their heads trying to piece it together with no information except maybe the fourth official comes over and says, oh, we screwed up, and then scurries back so he doesn't get his head taken off. There needs to kind of just, like you said, common sense, bring these guys, at least give some of these lesser officials rated, however you want to do it. Have these guys kind of instill them with some confidence to, hey, if this thing happens and you're in the thick of it, do not you just use your fucking head. Just use your head and be like, we can do this and take care of this. So a week's worth of aftermath doesn't happen. Or what, you're going to get Postacoglu going to yell at you for 2 minutes and then everything's going to go forward because there was an explanation of what happened? Or are you going to get 2 weeks of just speculation and yelling and demanding replays and all these things, which could have been completely avoided if you just used common sense for 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's kind of the moral of the story of the match was it didn't work out. The refereeing wasn't good. The play wasn't great at the beginning. It really didn't help us on either side. And at the end of the day, the fallout, though I thought originally it might be like a galvanizing moment and something that could pull the team together by how well they played with 9 men, the longer it goes and we keep talking about it, like we played a match today and I think they were still talking about it at times in the post-match presser. Like I would have just liked all the players and managers and staff just been like, yeah, that's over. Like we can't talk about it anymore. If there's something else, we'll talk about it when it comes up. If something changes or there's an announcement or something new gets released. But as of what we know now, we dropped 3 points. We are not allowed to get any points. We need to get ready for Brighton now. And we had a big match today in the Europa League. So let's talk about that Europa League match. And I would tell you who they played today, except for I'm not sure that I know exactly how to pronounce it. But it is Union Saint something Union Belgian
Saint
that I don't understand.
Gillois.
Yeah, Gillois is something that I will probably make into 3 different words and probably swear by the end of it, not even trying to. So what I will go is they weren't very good. They didn't have much talent. And it was a little confusing why it was so close for so long. But depending on how much you guys saw the match, looking at this starting lineup, outside of the fact that Allison was in goal, knowing that Kelleher picked up an injury and wasn't available for the match, what were your feelings when it came? Let's start with the defense. And Brian, I'll start with you here. Alexander-Arnold, Konate, Kwanzaa, Tsimikas. Comfortable, uncomfortable, questioning it.
Completely comfortable. I was fine with that. I think that Kwanzaa deserves his time on the pitch after what he played in the past couple weeks. I think the only question I would have would be Simicast, but I think for Simicast needs to go there and get the playing time. But other than that, I'm good with it.
And Trevor, Alexander-Arnold, obviously, third time he's captained the club. Big day for him out in a European competition. Konate was really, really good at times, showing his pace. Cleaned up for Allison a couple times. What was your opinion on Simicast today? And overall, are you comfortable when he comes in for Robertson, or do you think that's a position this side still needs to improve on in the long run, either being cover for Robo or someone who actually pushes him for his starting spot?
Yeah, I think he held his own against much lesser opposition. Yeah, USG, as we'll refer to him to save the blushes. They're a team that was kind of overmatched. Even they're first in the Belgian league. Cool. They were a team that just didn't really have any answers at any point. The only real opportunities they had came off of egregious mistakes from us, and that game should have been triple the score it was, in my opinion. But I will get to that in a little bit. But looking at Simicast, I think he's, even if he signed long term, that's great. He's not a guy that's ever going to challenge Robertson for that spot, even though we thought for probably like a 10-game period year before that, he was playing really well at the start of the season. And you're like, maybe this is the guy that can kind of push him or maybe be his replacement down the road. And that has quickly dissipated. I think he's a good squad player, but competition, he is not.
So when we look at that midfield, Elliott, Endo, and Gravenberch, I've made a few times comments that I feel really bad for Elliott because I felt like he waited all year. He's had great performances all year long in all the matches. He's actually appeared in every one of our matches at this point. Before that Spurs match, that might have been the first one he didn't get any pitch time in. But we've seen Elliott and how well he's played. And I felt like he was kind of hard done in that first match where he got to start and it was 11 changes. He starts today alongside Gravenberch and Endo. We'll get to Endo in a minute. What was your first initial thought, Brian, when you saw that midfield? And do you think that this is a balanced enough midfield to compete in cup competitions? Or does it not really work if you have two players on the pitch like Gravenberch and Elliott both trying to go forward at every chance they can?
Honestly, when I first saw it right there, I wanted Jones to go there to play instead of Elliott. I thought that we were not going to have Jones for a couple weeks since his red card, and I thought that we're going to probably need to use Elliott coming down the line. I think that the squad, that the midfield is able to compete. I think that that we have with Gravenberch right there. I think there still needs to be a little bit of somebody who's ready to go out there to sit back a little bit more and does more of a playmaker. I think that Elliott can fill that role, but sometimes it seems like he tries to go and just tries too hard to run on the ball. And I think that Gravenberch is an 8. I mean, so I think that we still have these that same way you talked about, where players are trying to be too offensive, to actually sit back and go there and being more of a support for Endo in that role right there, in his role in being as the number 6. But I think we can compete with the squad. I think that but I think that McAllister is definitely needed to go there to actually support the squad toward the second half, or or bring in Sabazai in as a second half substitute right there, just to get that last bit of a balance for them.
So Hassan Hirsi jumped in with a comment, and thank you for sharing your comments. Please continue to add them in. We'll bring them up as they come throughout the show. The defense was great. Only Simicast was a bit the weak position. Kwanzaa and Konate were solid. And we're going to get to Kwanzaa in a little bit because I think he was actually even better than solid. I'll say this about the starting lineup, midfield. I thought it was fine. They played okay. You just realize what you miss when you don't have McAllister and Soboslai. I think that's the real change in this side, is having those two players like really impacting from all over the pitch. Up top, I was a little surprised to see Mo, Nunez, and Jota starting. I thought we'd get two of those three. I thought Doak might get a start, or even maybe start somebody else, and even pushing Elliott up top into the front three just to give a little bit more minutes and a little more rest. I get why they did it. Listen, the best bit of football the entire match was the one that Nunez has to bury with his left foot, decides to kick with his right, and literally almost hit the corner flag. Elliott was great. Mo's great. But I got in this argument with Kazi in our Discord channel, and it'll come up with others. Nobody buried Mo 4 minutes earlier for being one-on-one with a goalkeeper and basically kicking the ball off his own shin to kick off the keeper's shin. And I just think it's easy sometimes to just bang on Darwin for the misses without recognizing like the opportunities that he creates. And I get it. In most cases, we're like, oh, Darwin's going to score a worldie later and it'll make up for the three misses. Nothing makes up for these misses. The misses have to stop for him to reach the level that he and we all want him to be at. I still think we hold him at a different level than any of the other players on the pitch. Maybe it's the price tag. Maybe it's just how polarizing it is because the fans love him so much and we want him to do so well that there's half the supporters defending him and half the supporters saying he's shite. Where do you land on this, Trevor? Like, is it just ultimately bad misses? Are you more on the fact that you can only have these sitter misses if you're always in the right place? And when strikers are in the right place, eventually they score goals. And we spent 5+ years looking for a striker to get in right places to score goals. Like, where do you lie on the Darwin conundrum before we kind of wrap up the first half and talk about the second half and, more importantly, where we move into Brighton?
Yeah, he is easily the most frustrating player that we've had in quite some time. Just because that it, like you said, getting into those spaces is something that we've struggled for years since Bobby kind of like took that step back. It's something where you want to commend him for continuing to run and continuing to be a part of the play and not sulking every time he misses and just kind of getting that Ronaldo throw my hands up every time a pass doesn't get to me, even though I made a good run, so on and so forth. It's that 50-50 where you want to be mad at him because the misses that are piling up almost are starting to get comical. It's not as, oh, well, he tripped over his feet once and the ball went over the bar. He's getting these ones now where he's not, like you say, he's not picking the right foot to shoot with. He's not getting himself square when he has 5 seconds to deal with it. Or he's taking a touch so he can do a step over and then putting it off the bar and stuff like that. There's so many things that he does that frustrate you as a fan. And I can only imagine what it's doing to Jurgen Klopp's blood pressure, seeing these things where he probably does it in training where he goes, okay, I think you have to, when this happens, you go do this. And then he does that. He does the first part perfectly. And then he gets it and just everything goes pear-shaped from there. And you're just trying to just go, why can't you do the business end? All the hard stuff that we're asking you to do that you were kind of reticent to do when you came here. And now you're taking it like a fish to water. And then the thing is like, okay, the easy thing for you should be scoring the goals. And
so
now,
who leads the team in goals from open play? Darwin Nunez. Who leads the team? Who leads the team in goal involvement from open play? Darwin Nunez. This is what I come back to. Like, I understand the frustration, but I still am like, he's a 20-something-year-old striker who is just getting around and has learned, to your point, to do all the little things, is doing the small work. He's earned himself a starting spot. He is Klopp's number one player. People say, oh, Klopp's so frustrated, Klopp's so upset. Klopp acknowledged he would have started against Spurs and Gakpo would have been on the bench, but he had a tweak during the warm-up. He was the starter on Saturday afternoon. He is this team's starting center forward because he gives this team the best chance to score goals. He creates goals all over the pitch, assists, like he hits bars. Like we all seem to just come back to this idea. Like he has 5 more goals in the same amount of his first. I think he's played 48 games, 38 games, something like that for Liverpool. He has 5 more goals than Suarez had during that time at the club. And Suarez was actually an older and more established player leaving Ajax than he was leaving Benfica, with less promise and less pressure on him and not having to compete with a guy like Haaland. So to me, I feel like this is a little bit, for me personally, I think this is our like storm in a teacup. Like I think United fans were like way too hard on Luke Shaw for a period and way too hard on Fred because they were like, for a time period, they were the only guys that did all the little things no one liked. And like they got destroyed. And I thought it was funny, but if I were a supporter, I think I would have defended them. And I feel like that's kind of Darwin in this microcosm, that it's like everything the guy does is a call for playing somebody else. And I think if you actually look at what the man does for 90 minutes or 55 minutes or whatever he's given on the pitch, it's usually a net positive. Yet for some reason, we remember the big miss. And I understand he's the number 9 to Hassan's comment. I just don't think that this club has ever held one player accountable for wins or losses. And I feel like right now he is our lightning rod. He is the one that gets all of the credit and also all of the supporters' strife. Brian, am I just the biggest Darwin apologist, or am I seeing this wrong? Like, in all seriousness, I'm asking because on some levels I catch myself asking myself why I'm not as frustrated as everyone else.
I'm not frustrated with him. You know, there's this little moments, like Trevor said right there, you know, the little misses right there, but his link-up play right there has come leaps and bounds. I think that Mo's established a good relationship with him. I really think that Darwin is really a pretty solid player with lots of potential with him. I mean, to the story about the number 9, when was the last time we actually had a solid 9? I mean, in that type of role. I mean, I understand that Bobby was like kind of a 9, but what was he really a 9? I mean, he did more than this one at 9 would normally do. I mean, I could think probably last number 9 that we had was probably like a Robbie Fowler or a Neil Heskey or somebody like that. I mean, that from back in the day.
I mean, Fernando Torres held the job.
Torres,
I mean, we don't like how he left, but he was good for a bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not. Yeah, definitely. I don't think you're being a Darwin apologist. I think that the kid, he's a kid. I mean, that's the one thing that, and they're heaping a lot of pressure on him, like you said. I mean, because you see Haaland, who's like just somebody who's like phenomenal, that you just don't quite understand why he has this talent that he does, and you're just trying to basically thrust Darwin into that same picture. I mean, I think Darwin holds his own. I think that he's a pretty solid player. I mean, but I think there's like little tweaks that he needs to be made. You know, Michael Owen, even though I hate to hear crap that he says that there's like a couple of missing gaps that he has in his game right there, that he needs somebody to actually sit there and just work with him on those gaps. I mean, to get him to world class.
Well, I think that's that argument about how Bielsa helped him so much. I mean, we shouldn't forget the great play of the last 2 number 9s. Christian Benteke and Diego Aspas, both of which are fondly remembered in our memories. And by fondly, I mean we remember them leaving, and that was fond. When we look at the first half, it wraps up with a mistake. Obviously, Trent breaks down the side, takes the shot, keeper spills it, Gravenberch buries it. Trevor, I didn't think Gravenberch was as good today as he was in his last Europa League start. Maybe it's just that tall glass of man looks a lot better in purple than he does in red, because he did look good in purple. He still fills the uniform, but he just looked today like he was a little all over the place, maybe not feeling as comfortable. But he gets his goal, big smile. Do you envision this guy becoming a goal scorer for this club, more of a workhorse for this club? Where do you see Gravenberch and his overall potential, and how much does it impact this year's team, not the one down the road?
Yeah, I do think he kind of was on autopilot, and I think there's a couple guys that were on autopilot today, and that's not something that you want to become a trend. But I think he was so good against Lask, where I don't think this may just probably be a one-off in terms of that kind of lackadaisical play. But I think the only thing they talked more about than the whole Diaz situation was the fact that this was the Luxembourg goalkeeper and that Jota and Portugal put up 9 on him in the last international break. I think those were the two things that were talked about more than the actual game. So he was a guy that was definitely pawing it into the middle. And the fact that Gravenberch was able to kind of see that and make him pay for one of those, I think that's a goal that you need to get. And it's a goal that a guy like him needs to get. Because when we go back to Darwin, if Darwin had picked that little spill up and put it in, everybody like, oh, poacher's goal, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But if Gravenberch is able to come up and see that this guy is putting these things into the middle over and over and over and over again, and he's able to come up from his position and put it in, and because he's not going to get many opportunities in the league, I think, to get goals. So if he can get goals consistently in the Europa League, I think that's going to do wonders for his confidence and kind of maybe give him the impetus to do that when he gets those opportunities in the league coming off the bench for like the last half an hour, to kind of go for that, knowing that you can, even if it is a poacher's goal, that you can get yourself in those positions and you can read the game well enough to go do that.
Yeah, so at the half they take off we see Diaz, Jones, and Mac come on. Off goes Darwin, Mo, and Endo. So the gut in me there says, well, that makes total sense because Darwin and Mo and Endo probably all have to start against Brighton with no Jones on the weekend. Now, before we get to the second half performance, some of the surprises, what we saw, and of course the Jota, classic, I was invisible all match and now I'll score the game-winning goal. The one that makes you actually take a deep breath and pause. Endo, once again, for me, he wasn't good. He wasn't bad. He was just there. Brian, am I being too hard? And are we getting to the point where Endo might be the guy who is not that good, not that bad, and just there?
I think Endo's a stopgap, personally. I mean, I said this when we signed him right there. He's a squad player. I don't think that we're going to see him be that exact role. He's for these type of matches, these cup matches, these, Europa League, and for the Carabao Cup and matches like that, to keep other players fit. I mean, I think that I think that his play is there. I can't really go and say phenomenal. I can't say horrible, like you said right there. It's just there. I mean, it's again, he's a stopgap player, and I think that this is what we could find a solid 6 in this window, and so we had to go there and sign a player that can basically keep McAllister healthy and fit, and so he can actually play our matches, because McAllister right now is going to be our number 6 going forward in the league. I don't think Endo is that player.
Yeah, I'm not sure I disagree. I didn't think he was great. Like I said, I don't think he was great. I don't think he was bad. He was just meh. And I think it has to get better. I thought he would boss the midfield today. He didn't, but I don't think he was asked to either. So I think that's a little hard to judge him on a match like today. He's a defensive midfielder who wants to defend, and today was the day where we were in possession, so it didn't make much sense. Ali had a couple shaky moments today, put the defense in trouble a few times. Kanate cleared him once. Kwanzaa cleared it off the line. You hang that more towards the fact that he didn't think he was going to play and needed a break, Trevor? Or did Ali maybe not take this match for granted, but because he wasn't planning to play and then he's forced to play, maybe just human nature sets in. You don't see them as having a real chance. Because to be honest, outside of a save in stoppage time, which was a good save, really was kind of a meh type of day for him. But he flapped out a couple. He missed that one on the corner, came out and missed the ball. It just seemed like it was a day where he was just off. Or am I just being hypercritical because there wasn't much to complain about today?
No, it did seem like his head was kind of somewhere else on a lot of occasions, where there was a couple back passes where you could see him trying to kind of do the math in his head where he was going to pass it, and then it just hit his feet, and then he's like, "Oh, I have the ball now. Okay, all right." And that the McAllister pass at the end that led to the one time he had to wake up. That kind of shows his class right there, is that he spent pretty much the entire game just in the clouds, and then when he got snapped back to reality and he's like, oh crap, I have to be Allison, and then did it in that one time to kind of keep the clean sheet. I don't think it's anything that we have to worry about, but this, I think in the Europa League, more than anything, I'm hoping that we don't have to, the Kelleher thing's not long term, because this has to be the thing where we have to save Allison somewhere, in my opinion, just because if we're going to try to compete on all fronts again, you're going to have to use him probably three times a week in lots of instances. And if the way some of these weeks are going to pile up, or we got 2 big league games, and then we're going to have like a round of 16 Europa League deal, or a round of 16 cup game, I don't want to use him for all 3, because you are going to just get that fatigue, and not physical. You're going to get that mental fatigue, especially with a keeper. I don't want to just have that on his reel. That one time that, Toulouse slipped one by him, and they're like, "Oh, look here, you got that." I don't want to put that on him. So getting Kelleher back, or at least having, maybe that's something to look at in January, getting a third guy. So if Kelleher does want to move on, or any of these things, having those like that mitigation just in case, I think is something we may want to look at in January.
Yeah, and I think that has to be the case. Before we move on to the Brighton match, quickly here, I just want to touch on Kwanzaa in the match. For me, Kwanzaa was the man of the match. I thought he was the best player on the pitch. He was a boss player. He's a young kid. He doesn't look out of his element. He can defend. He communicates well. There were a couple times he stepped in and made the right plays. He cleared the ball off the line to save the goal. Almost scored his first senior goal. Just a really quality player. Like, Brian, I'm going to start with you here, and we're going to go quick here, guys, so we all want to get to the Brighton match and give us at least 5-10 minutes to talk about it. So on Kwanzaa, Brian, quick, like 1 minute. What's impressed you the most about the player, and how far do you think his ceiling can go, and how quickly can it come? Can he fill one of the 2 or 3 center back roles we need?
Absolutely. I mean, his loan spell that he had at Bristol City last year, he was basically their player of the year. I think that he hasn't even grown into his body yet. I think we've got a world-class center back on our hands.
Wow. World class. I love it. I will say, anyone that starts 2023 playing for the Bristol Rovers and finds their way ending 2023 playing in European competition starting for Liverpool Football Club has had themselves one hell of a rise in one calendar year. Trevor, 30 seconds or less on Kwanzaa, what you saw today, what you've seen so far.
Incredible poise, goldfish memory. He's not a guy that is infallible when it takes to making a bad pass, but he's never going to, like we talked about with Darwin not putting his head down anymore. When he makes that bad pass, he's immediately sprinting back, and he has the pace to make up for his mistakes, and he doesn't let it affect him. He's incredibly poised, and I'm happy that he's getting these opportunities.
Harry McMullen jumps in. Welcome, Harry. Take some player to overtake the Bolton Barisi in Liverpool's pecking order. Bright future for Kwanzaa. And for anyone who doesn't or hasn't seen Harry's work on our website, Harry is doing tactical pieces for AmericanScouser.com, and they are outstanding, whether they are positionally driven, formation driven, just education pieces, or actual tactical setups for how we will attack one of our upcoming opponents. Harry's work is really, really good, and I highly recommend everyone that's on this listening or watching this pod right now to check out the website and find some of Harry's pieces because they're really, really good. Hassan jumps in with Kwanzaa is just 20 years old. We have a world-class defender. That is 2 world classes in one show, which basically means we are going way overboard, which means we are Reds fans, and I love it. Speaking of going overboard, let's get on board with what Sunday morning might look like. No one is happier that we are playing in the Europa League than my wife, Kelly, because it means lots of Sunday matches, which means Saturdays aren't ruined. But this Sunday morning, we will be going to Brighton, a trip down to the South Coast, to take on what is really kind of an unraveling and struggling Brighton side between their 2 poor performances in Europe. And I know they came back today and got a draw on the road at Marseille, which is a good point if you had secured 3 points in the first match at home. Coming off a tough fixture in the Premier League and a little bit of a turn of their schedule. Trevor, are we catching Brighton at the right time? Or is this the type of banana skin that Liverpool usually runs into, thinking they're catching a good team at the right time and they show up and give you one of their grade A performances?
I think Brighton is ripe for the picking. In past seasons, you're spot on. This would be the one where, they've just lost 4 in a row. They're going to come out and pump us. It's just the way it went for so many years. But this is a Brighton team. I watched the better part of the Villa Brighton game this past weekend. That was a massacre. Like, Villa had them over before like a half an hour, and they should have had more, to be fair. And I think Emery kind of called off the dogs at a certain point, and they were still
definitely did.
And they were still scoring. So that's, and yeah, the game against AEK, everybody thought they were going to go in and just, it's just this Greek team, and Brighton looked completely out of their depth. Yeah, they were able to come back and get a draw today. I think Europe is just quick things. Look how West Ham is taking to Europe this year, having that experience and doing it the couple times they have, and how Brighton is doing it. And it's 2 wildly different beasts. But if you look at the league, you'd say they're kind of similar. Whereas, like, yeah, they're kind of in the same place, table, talent, so on and so forth. I think that Europe may, if they don't go out in the group, they're going to slide down the table, I think.
Brian, starting lineup come Sunday morning. Who do you have starting in the back four along with Allison, of course?
I got Trent, I've got Konate, and I've got Verge and Andy and Robbo back in the starting left back.
Trevor, do you agree with those four, or do you think that is maybe a little hard done on Matip for how well he played against Spurs and the fact that he's the one who bangs that last second? Do you think Matip might get a run out against Brighton on the weekend? Almost because Klopp knows man management-wise that guy needs to get back on the pitch after the last time he kicked the ball, it ended the match in his own net.
I'd almost like to see Matip come on as a sub, hopefully with a lead, so the traveling supporters could kind of give him that "we're still behind you" applause for when he came on. I'm not saying we need to like save him from himself and not start him because he's in his own head and he's going to fall apart at the first chance he gets. I think Matip's a bit more of a strong-willed guy than that. But I agree with Brian. I think that's the back four we should go with. If Konate is back to full health, that should be our starting back four against any team in the top 10.
Yeah, I struggle with the idea of Konate, a player who has struggled with fitness basically since the day he pulled the jersey on, getting a start and playing 90 minutes on a Thursday and then starting Sunday morning. So for me, I think Matip starts. I'm not saying I want him there or I think he's one of our best four defenders. I just feel like Matip starts this match. And I also think Trent can only give you about 60 minutes. Then you probably go to Gomez to close the match out just to make sure that you don't push his legs. In the midfield, Trevor, quickly here, we only got a few minutes left. In the midfield, you expect, I mean, I have to imagine we expect Szoboszlai and McAllister. Is it Endo? Is it Elliott? Is it Gravenberch? Who's the third midfielder with Jones out of the proverbial guaranteed best 11 that we've seen that Klopp has rolled out in 2023-24?
I think he's going to roll with Harvey. It's kind of that merit badge start. Whereas I think Harvey will also have the quickest hook on him if things go wrong. He's the guy that's going to have the shortest leash. But I think it should be Szoboszlai, McAllister, and Elliott.
Brian, how about you in the midfield?
I'll swap out Harvey for Gravenberch. I think you're going to have McAllister still going to sit back in that number 6 role, and I think that you're going to have Szoboszlai and Gravenberch up in front of him.
And I guess I'll be the contrarian here, and I'll say I think Endo's going to start, and it's two-parter. One, this is a team that can play both with possession and play on the counter, so you need some form of defensive presence in your midfield. Two, Gravenberch and Elliott got way more minutes today, and I think if either one of them was in Klopp's mind for Sunday, they would have got pulled on the 45-minute, and I think that's why Endo came off. And three, I don't think there's any way Klopp can hold McAllister back and tell him to play deep lying in the 6 in his first match at Brighton, coming off of his move to Liverpool. And I'm going to go out here and say it now. We win this match. I'll take Timuchin's scoreline of 3-1, and I will also take that McAllister opens his account and has to do that awkward thing where you don't get to celebrate the first goal you score for your new club because you scored against your old club. And I think McAllister's getting closer and closer to actually kind of instituting himself into the attack. And I think this might be the first time, and it's almost forced because of the Jones red card, that he's going to get to play in the position in which we bought him to play, which is in the most attacking and most forward of our midfielders. And I think when it's all said and done, and I do believe this will happen, We didn't have time to talk about it tonight, but I believe the reports. I think Liverpool will buy Andre in January from Fluminense, and it'll be a great buy. If you see his numbers over the last 3 years, he's been one of the best sixes in the world, and it just keeps tracking better and better. I think the long-term answer is basically McAllister the most forward, Andre as your deep-lying six, and Szoboszlai dropping deeper to create. And I think that gives you the best balance you have. And then you have Gravenberch and Jones and Elliott, and you really start to create a deep, section. So I guess the only other question then is, starting up top, is it Diaz in for Jota, and Jota's your impact sub off the bench? Does Darwin maybe not start based off his sitter and Jota's late goal? We have literally about a minute left, guys. I want each of you to give me a score line and who you think starts from the front, and if you have any big surprise for the lineup. We'll start with you, Brian.
Okay, I've got Diaz and Nunez and Mo up front, and I have a 4-0 score line. And I don't think there's going to be really a surprise. I think we're just going to pummel them because I think that Brighton is wounded and they can't play 2 competitions at one time.
Trevor?
Same front line, 2-0. Say Lewis Dunk gets sent off.
Oh, Lewis Dunk gets sent off. I mean, if there was ever a match that the referees would do everything in their power to show we're not biased against Liverpool, it would be the week after last. That said,
he gets sent off, and McAllister takes the penalty.
I wouldn't be shocked at all if they gave McAllister a penalty in this match. I also wouldn't be shocked if we get an early lead and Mo gets subbed off to give him some early rest, knowing we're going into an international break, and knowing that during the international break, some of our players are asked to do things that are almost like unworldly. Like Mo's asked to play every minute at the highest level and carry his whole team, just like Robertson is. And then we wonder why 2 weeks after every international break, those guys struggle. They play a different level of they carry a different level of responsibility, both for their country and for their international side when they perform. And I think it's unfair that we think of that. We're like, oh yeah, well, Henderson plays for England, and you're like, Henderson trains, hangs out with the dudes, and gets 15 minutes in the second 45 on the weekend, right? Like, it wasn't the same to what Robertson has to do to be captain of Scotland. So we picked up a win. We found our way to get through, and we got through a Thursday night without Maka. Guys, thank you very much. For everyone, please go to the YouTube page, give it a subscribe. If you're on Facebook, give it a like, drop a comment, let us know how we're doing. Let us know the things you don't like, but make sure to send those comments to Maka. He cares a lot more than I do. It's his show and all. For all of you out there, thank you for watching. Wonderful win for the Reds today. Here we go for Brighton on Sunday. For all of us at American Scouser TV, I'm Gally. Brian, Trevor, thank you for joining me. Have a great week, guys.
Cheers.
See you soon.